One of the things I was unaware of until much later in life is just how many man-made lakes there are in Pennsylvania. The concept of a man-made body of water was never particularly new to me, as there was a small lake not far from my house where we fished. There was also a pond in my immediate backyard, a throwback from when my side of the small town had been a working farm. Regardless, the size of some of these lakes hid from me the fact that they were not entirely natural. Up the road from Bond and I is Moraine State Park, with a large lake which buried part of the highway as well as a couple small towns. We've of course spoken about the Allegheny Reservoir in a few episodes, as the region looms large in lore as well as personal influence. Today though, let's take a mile marker and talk about Raystown Lake, the largest of the Commonwealth's man-made lakes. Raystown Lake is today the largest of Pennsylvania's man-made lakes, and it drops to depths as deep as 200 feet in some parts. It should also be mentioned that there are stories of a lake monster which Bond is researching at the moment, and which I find to be mostly hilarious. The lake has grown over the years, starting with an original dam conceived in 1905 and completed around 1911. This first dam, built for hydroelectric power, stood 45 feet tall, spanning the Raystown branch of the Juniata River. The lake created by this first dam was a far shallower affair, and only about a quarter of the size of what stands today. The original dam is still there at Raystown, albeit completely submerged, dwarfed as it is by the current 225-foot dam. That first dam was in operation through the 1960s. In March of 1936, Pennsylvania was hit by the St. Patrick's Day floods. Conditions for severe flooding were ripe that winter. In his book, Great Floods of Pennsylvania by William Shank, he writes, "The winter of 1935-36 had been one of the most severe that Pennsylvania had seen for years. Huge quantities of snow fell in January and February throughout the state, and prevailing low temperatures preserved it well." So things were beginning to warm up late in February, and the snow, along with the thick ice which covered the rivers, began to thaw and move. Few were towns not impacted. Roughly 30% of Harrisburg was underwater, and a reported 100 Pennsylvanians would die as a result of the flooding. Following these events, conversation turned to the need for flood control throughout the Commonwealth. Many towns along the large rivers and streams have today earthen levees, which constructed around this time, but large dams would take a little while longer as there were barriers in the way, including the Second World War. The current dam at Raystown was authorized by the Flood Control Act of 1962. It took a little more than 10 years to be realized, and it would be dedicated by President Gerald Ford, who concluded the statement with the quote, "May the Raystown Dam we dedicate here today challenge us to dedicate ourselves to building a better nation and a better world for us all." End quote. The current dam cost roughly $76 million to complete, but was quick to pay for itself. As noted on the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers website, Raystown practically made up the difference before it was even completed. In 1972, Hurricane Agnes struck the construction site. With only 58% of the dam completed, taxpayers still saved $60 million in flood damage. These days, the dam continues to generate hydroelectric power and flood control. It also provides a large body of water, 28 miles long, for recreational purposes. Tucked in the Allegheny region of the Appalachian Mountain Range, the surrounding hills and woods hug the lake, and the cabins and boats are numerous, as are the stories and rumors surrounding the land. There are archaeological remains preserved and studied by nearby Juniata College that show that the region has been inhabited as far back as 12,000 years ago. Under the waters are parts and buildings of the town of H. Even automobiles are sitting under the waters which inundated the towns back in 1974. The H post office, opened in 1887, closed a year prior to the dam's completion. Raystown Lake is Pennsylvania's largest man-made lake and is one of the most visited places in Pennsylvania. It's probably the most visited place in south central Pennsylvania.
Hey everyone, it's Bond here from Dr. Pennsylvania. Today I wanted to fill you in on the research I did for Raystown Ray, which is a cryptid that I was unfamiliar with until Nick mentioned it. We were talking about lakes that were man-made and also had cryptids associated with them. So for decades now, there have been sightings of a creature in Huntington County's Raystown Lake. The creature is often described as a plesiosaur type creature, kind of thick Nessie, big body, long neck, little head, and like 4 flippers. It's usually described as being 60 to 70 feet long, though estimates and sightings do vary. Some people claim to see the full creature, some people just see waves, or just a large shadow in the lake. The first recorded sighting of Raystown Ray occurred in 1962, whenever it was still the old Raystown Dam. This was 9 years before the original dam was decommissioned in 1971, and the new, much larger one was put in place. Dwight Bell, the managing director of Raystown Lake, has been quoted saying, "We've known it's been here for a while now. It's a private creature, but it comes out around this time of year, April." He said, "Call it Raystown's own Punxsutawney Phil," trying to draw notoriety, obviously, from a much more confirmed creature. Another gentleman, Jeff Krause, who is the wildlife biologist for Raystown Lake, was quoted in 2006 saying, "I believe it must be vegetarian. We have not seen any evidence of this animal taking fish, geese, otters, or ducks. So I would suggest that our swimmers and boaters should feel very safe. It appears the animal's habits are similar to manatees, which are completely herbivorous and gentle. The increase of weed beds around the lake is probably providing more food in the shallows for herbivores and would increase these sightings." Also around 2005 or 2006, I came across a sighting that I wanted to relay to you guys I thought was pretty interesting. Though the gentleman's name is not quoted here, I'm going to go ahead and read you the full sighting. It was back in early May 2005 or 2006. I was camping in the Susquehannock campgrounds at Raystown Lake. Having camped there many years in the past with my family, this time I was alone. I had never heard stories about Ray previous to this. As had been my normal routine, first thing in the morning around 7 a.m., I would go for a swim on the south side of the camp area called the Bow. This was the first time there was no one else in the area. Houseboats like to come through there because there is a no-wake zone. As I was swimming, I looked up and saw something swimming ahead. It was coming from the larger part of the area from my left to the smaller cove area. When I saw it, I stopped and began to tread water as I watched. I couldn't figure out what it was. I first thought it was a deer or a bear because of the wake following it seemed large. Then it did something I've never heard about a deer or a bear doing. It dived down and then came up again while swimming straight. When it came up, it noticed me treading water and turned towards me and started coming my way. I stayed treading water until it got about halfway to me, and then it dived under again while coming up towards me. That's when I took off swimming back towards the campground area. Because I thought whatever it was could outswim me, I decided to go to the shore, but could not get totally out of the water due to the high bank along the water. After standing with a 30-pound rock in my hands, what seemed like forever, I noticed the thing swim back up to where I first saw it. I waited thinking it would come up to the shore and climb out, but it never did. I swam back to the camp area and never went back in. I don't scare easily, but this got my attention. Also around 2006 was the first known photo of Raystown Ray taken by a local fisherman. And since then, there have actually been, what I can find, maybe a dozen or so photos from a number of different people claiming to sight the monster. Ray has gotten so popular that in 2010, Sci-Fi, the show Fact or Faked, actually sent a team to investigate the lake. The investigation included doing night dives, sonar recordings, scanning, even chumming the lake with carp, which kind of contradicts what the biologist said earlier, but I'm sure it made for good television. They didn't find anything hard or conclusive, but what they did say was that they believe the witnesses they talked to were generally credible, and that the lake was definitely large enough to hold a large creature. Now, the majority of the sources I used for this have been the Huntington County Visitors Bureau, and also the site Cryptomundo, which seemed to get a lot of its information from the Huntington Visitors Bureau as well. So they seem to certainly be open about the monster's existence, if not a little tongue-in-cheek sometimes. You can buy Raystown Ray merchandise, you can buy hats, pins, stickers, t-shirts, all that kind of stuff. So they seem to be having fun with it, which, assuming the creature is a herbivore, seems just fine. As far as what people could be seeing, there don't seem to be a history of sturgeon in the lake, which is can be a very large freshwater fish. The lake is known, however, for its large population of carp. A lot of folks in the area have been there and have fed the carp at the one dam because it's just, there's a ton of fish. I can't overstate how many carp are in this one area. And carp can grow really large. I mean, there are stories of carp getting over, a few hundred pounds. So could what people be seeing is a large carp? Who knows? With a lot of other aquatic cryptids, a lot of the possibilities could be people are seeing logs, people are just seeing weird currents, creating anomalies in the water that make it look like there's something there, other just submerged debris moving strangely. But according to what I could find in Huntington County, Cryptomundo, also with Sci-Fi's Fact or Faked, I think we can say people are definitely seeing something. Whenever you have a large body of water like this and enough people on it, you are going to have people see things that they can't explain. I think that's probably true of most places. But either way, with Raystown Ray, it seems to be one of the more docile cryptids, and if you're going to go searching for something like this, it might not be a bad option.